Commander Zara 9 walked back and forth across the small room she shared with her human mate. Her claws clicked on the metal floor with each step. Her pointed ears kept moving up and down and her tail tucked low between her legs. The fur on her neck stood up in small patches. Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her datapad where she was reading about plant samples from their last mission. She had been with Zara 9 for 2 years now, long enough to know when something was very wrong. The Luparian never acted like this. Zara 9 was usually calm and confident, the kind of officer who could face down space pirates without her heart rate going up. "Zara, what's wrong?" Sarah asked, setting down her work. "You've been walking around like this for an hour." Zara 9 stopped and looked at her mate. Sarah's brown eyes were full of concern. Her black hair was tied back in the simple way she always wore it when working. She was small compared to most humans, but she never seemed small to Zara 9. Sarah was the bravest person she knew. "I need to tell you something," Zara 9 said, then started walking again. "Okay, so tell me." Zara 9 made a small whining sound, the kind that came from deep in her throat when she was scared. "I went to see Dr. Kess today. For the medical check that was due," Sarah nodded. "All crew members had to get checked every few months. It was normal, and the test showed something." Zara 9 sat down hard on their shared sleeping platform. Her ears went completely flat against her head. "Sarah, we're going to have younglings." For a moment, Sarah just stared. Then her face lit up with the biggest smile Zara 9 had ever seen. Sarah jumped up and rushed over, her hands reaching out to touch Zara 9's face. "Really? We're having babies? Oh my God, Zara, this is amazing." Sarah's voice was high and excited. "I mean, I knew it was possible, but the doctor said the chances were so small and—" "Sarah, stop." Zara 9's voice was quiet and serious. Sarah stopped talking, but she kept smiling. "What do you mean, stop? This is wonderful news." Zara 9 looked down at her paws. "You don't understand. You need to prepare yourself. This isn't like having human younglings. Of course it's not exactly the same, but no, Sarah, you really don't understand." Zara 9 looked up at her mate. Her golden eyes were full of worry. "Luparian younglings are dangerous." Sarah laughed a little. "All babies are a lot of work, Zara, I know that." Zara 9 stood up quickly. "They're not just work, Sarah, they're dangerous. To you, to me, to everyone on this ship." She started walking again. "Maybe we should ask for a transfer. Get you to a safe planet before— wait. Sarah held up her hands. "Slow down. What do you mean dangerous?" Zara 9 stopped walking and looked at her mate. Sarah's face had changed from excited to confused. "On my homeworld, when a female is going to have younglings, the whole pack prepares. We build special dens. We move the elders and the weak pack members away. We get ready for—" She made that whining sound again. "We get ready for chaos." "Chaos?" "Luparian younglings are born ready to hunt, Sarah. They have claws and teeth. They're fast and strong. They don't sleep much. They don't stay still. They break things and climb things and—" Zara 9 sat down again. "Most other species can't handle being around them." Sarah was quiet for a moment. She came over and sat next to Zara 9 on the sleeping platform. "How dangerous are we talking about? Remember the vegan trader who visited last month? The one with the big tusks?" Sarah nodded. "He told me once about a space station that had to close down for 6 months because there was a Luparian family living there. The younglings got into the air system and broke the power grid 3 times. They figured out how to open the food storage and ate everything. They scared the other species so much that half the residents moved away." Sarah's eyes got wide. "Okay, that does sound pretty intense. It gets worse." Zara 9 looked at her paws again. "Luparian younglings grow very fast. What takes human babies months to learn, our younglings learn in days, walking, running, climbing, hunting. By the time they're a few months old, they're as big as human children, but with all their natural weapons." "Natural weapons?" Zara 9 held up her paw and let her claws come out. They were sharp and curved, good for gripping and tearing. These, but on younglings who don't know how to control them yet. Plus teeth that can bite through metal cables. Plus speed that makes them hard to catch. Plus intelligence that lets them figure out how to get into places they shouldn't be. Sarah was very quiet now. She reached out and took one of Zara 9's paws in both her hands. "How many are we having?" "Dr. Kess thinks 2, maybe 3. Multiple babies who grow up fast and have claws and teeth and like to hunt things." "Yes." Sarah was quiet for a long time. Zara 9 could hear her breathing and could smell the change in her scent. Fear, but also something else. something that reminded Zara 9 of the smell Sarah had when she was working on a difficult problem. Sarah, I know this is a lot. Maybe we should talk to Captain Rodriguez about getting you transferred to... No. Sarah's voice was firm. No? Sarah looked up at Zara 9. Her brown eyes had a look that Zara 9 knew well. It was the look Sarah got when she decided to do something that everyone else thought was impossible. I'm not going anywhere. We're having babies and I'm going to figure out how to handle it. Sarah, you don't understand how bad this could be. Maybe I don't understand yet, but I will. Sarah squeezed Zara 9's paw. How long do we have? About 6 months in your time. 6 months to prepare. Sarah stood up and started walking around the room, but her walking was different from Zara 9's worried pacing. Sarah's walking was the kind she did when she was planning. Okay, I need to learn everything I can about Luparian younglings. I need to talk to Dr. Kess about what to expect. I need to figure out how to baby-proof our quarters for babies with claws. Zara 9 watched her mate with amazement. Sarah, I just told you that our younglings might be too dangerous for you to handle safely. Sarah stopped walking and smiled at her. Zara, humans have been raising babies in dangerous places for thousands of years. We had babies when there were big animals trying to eat us. We had babies during wars and disasters and famines. We're good at this. But not Luparian babies. No, not Luparian babies. But how different can it be? Sarah sat down next to Zara 9 again and put her arm around her shoulders. Besides, there are babies. Half human, half Luparian. Maybe they'll be easier than full Luparian younglings. Zara 9 leaned into Sarah's warmth. Or maybe they'll be twice as much trouble. Sarah laughed. Then we'll figure out how to handle twice as much trouble. She kissed the top of Zara 9's head, right between her ears. We're going to be okay, Zara. All of us. Zara 9 wanted to believe her mate, but she had grown up hearing stories about youngling season. Stories that made grown Luparians shake with fear. Still, this was Sarah, the human who had walked into a Luparian military base and convinced them to let her study their plants. The human who had learned to speak Luparian better than most Luparians spoke human. If anyone could find a way to handle dangerous younglings, maybe it was her mate. I hope you're right, Zara 9 said quietly. I'm always right, Sarah said with a grin. Well, mostly right. Okay, sometimes right. But I'm going to be right about this. Sarah spent the next 3 days reading everything she could find about Luparian biology and childcare. What she learned made her understand why Zara 9 had been so worried. The ship's computer had files from the Luparian Republic's official database. Sarah read through medical reports, cultural studies, and historical records. Each file made her more amazed that any species had survived having babies like this. Luparian younglings were born after only 4 months, but they came out more developed than human babies. They could see, hear, and smell perfectly from birth. Their muscles were strong enough to support their own weight. Most shocking of all, they were born with a full set of sharp teeth. They start hunting within days of birth. Sarah read out loud to herself in their empty quarters. Zara 9 was on duty, so Sarah was alone with her research. Hunting what exactly? The answer was in the next file. Small animals, insects, anything that moved quickly. On the Luparian homeworld, new mothers would bring wounded prey animals into the den for younglings to practice on. It was considered normal and healthy. Sarah made a face. Okay, that's not happening on this ship. She kept reading. Luparian younglings grew incredibly fast. In their first month, they would double in size. By 3 months, they would be as big as human 5-year-olds, but with the strength and speed of adult wolves. Their intelligence developed just as quickly. They could understand complex problems by the time they were 6 months old. The real problem was their social behavior. Luparian younglings were pack hunters from birth. They worked together to solve problems, escape containment, and find food. They tested everything around them to see if it could be hunted, eaten, or broken. Sarah found a video file labeled Youngling Behavior Study. She played it and immediately regretted the decision. The video showed 3 Luparian younglings, about 2 months old in what looked like a testing room. They were the size of large dogs but moved like nothing Sarah had ever seen. They were fast, smart, and completely without fear. In the 10-minute video, the younglings managed to break open a metal food container, climb a smooth wall by working together, and figure out how to open a door that was supposed to be childproof. They did it all while playing and making happy sounds. Oh no, Sarah said to herself. She paused the video and called up the ship's communication system. Sarah to Dr. Seth, are you available to talk? Dr. Seth was the ship's science officer, a reptilian from the scaled worlds. She had worked with many different species and might have useful information. Dr. Chen, hello, came Seth's hissing voice through the communicator. How can I help you? I need to ask you about Luparian younglings. Have you ever worked around them? There was a long pause. Why do you ask this question? Zara and I are going to have babies. Another long pause, then a sound that might have been Seth sucking in air. Dr. Chen, I must offer my sympathy for your difficult situation. Sympathy? Please hold. I will come to your quarters. This conversation should happen in person. 10 minutes later, Dr. Seth arrived at Sarah's door. The tall reptilian had to duck to fit through the human-sized doorway. Her scales were a dark green color and her large yellow eyes showed what Sarah was learning to recognize as concern. Dr. Chen, please sit down, Seth said in her careful way of speaking. It's that bad? I have encountered Luparian younglings twice in my career. Both times were memorable. Seth sat down in the chair across from Sarah. Her long tail curled around her feet. The first time was on a research station 15 years ago. A Luparian family was living there while the mother worked on a mining survey. The younglings were 6 months old, 2 of them. Sarah waited. They got into the station's computer system, not the user interface, you understand. They physically got inside the computer cores. They were playing a hunting game with the data processors. It took us 3 days to get them out, and another week to repair the damage. How did they get in? They chewed through the access panels. Luparian teeth can bite through most metals when they're motivated. And everything is motivation to a youngling. Sarah felt her stomach drop. What was the second time? Seth's tail twitched, which Sarah had learned meant she was nervous. A cargo ship. The younglings were 8 months old, almost fully grown. They had learned to work together very well. They turned the ship's gravity off and on like it was a game. They thought it was funny to watch the other passengers float around. Could the other passengers handle it? Most of the passengers left at the next port. The ones who stayed had to be sedated during youngling playtime. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Dr. Seth, do you think it's impossible for humans to handle Luparian younglings? The reptilian scientist thought carefully before answering. Dr. Chen, most species find Luparian younglings overwhelming. They are too fast, too strong, too clever, and too energetic. Most species develop stress reactions just from being near them. But humans? I do not know. Humans are unusual in many ways, but Luparian younglings are also unusual. Seth paused. It will be interesting to observe. After Seth left, Sarah called the ship's engineer, Click Whistle. The insectoid was good at solving mechanical problems and might have ideas about baby-proofing. Click Whistle speaking, came the translator's version of the engineer's communication sounds. Hi, this is Dr. Chen. I need some advice about making our quarters safe for babies. Human babies? I have read that you should cover sharp corners and Luparian babies. The communicator went quiet for so long that Sarah thought it might have broken. Click Whistle? Are you there? Dr. Chen, are you making a joke? No joke. Zara and I are having younglings in about 6 months. More silence, then rapid clicking sounds that the translator couldn't handle. Finally, Click Whistle's voice came back. Dr. Chen, I must tell you about the time my hive worked on a space station with Luparian younglings. Sarah was starting to recognize this pattern. What happened? The younglings learned to fly. Fly? The station had low gravity in some sections for cargo handling. The younglings figured out how to use the gravity changes to jump very far distances. They could move from one end of the station to the other without touching the floor. That actually sounds kind of fun. It was not fun for the rest of us. They would drop from the ceiling onto other species. They thought it was a hunting game. 3 different species had stress breakdowns and had to leave. Sarah thanked Click Whistle and ended the call. She sat in her quarters alone, thinking about everything she had learned. Luparian younglings were stronger, faster, and smarter than human children. They grew incredibly quickly and had natural weapons. They were born to hunt and had no fear of anything. Every other species seemed to think that having these babies was a disaster waiting to happen. Sarah looked at the research files still open on her data pad. She thought about Zara 9's worried face and the way everyone offered sympathy instead of congratulations. Then she thought about human history. Humans had survived ice ages and droughts. They had learned to live in deserts and jungles and frozen wastelands. They had raised children while being hunted by predators that could kill a grown adult. Human parents had always found ways to keep their babies safe and help them grow, no matter how difficult the situation was. Okay, Sarah said to herself. So Luparian babies are fast and strong and like to hunt things. Human babies used to live in caves with lions and bears outside. How different can this be? She opened a new file on her datapad and started making notes. If other species couldn't handle Luparian younglings, maybe it was because they were thinking about the problem wrong. Maybe what Luparian younglings needed wasn't to be controlled or contained. Maybe they needed to be understood. Sarah began planning. She had 6 months to figure out how to do something that most of the galaxy thought was impossible. It was exactly the kind of challenge that made her excited instead of scared. After all, she was human. Humans had always been good at doing impossible things. Word spread quickly through the ship about Sarah and Zara 9's upcoming younglings. The news traveled the way all news did on a small research vessel, through the meal hall during shift changes, and in quiet conversations in the corridors. The reactions were not what Sarah had expected. Dr. Chen, "I am so sorry," said Lieutenant Vex, one of the Andromedan officers. His blue skin had turned a darker shade, which Sarah knew meant he was upset. "Is there anything we can do to help you prepare for this tragedy?" Sarah almost choked on her coffee. Tragedy? Well, yes. Having Luparian younglings when you are not Luparian yourself. It is very dangerous. Perhaps we should ask the captain to arrange for your transfer to a medical station. This conversation happened at least 5 times every day. Crew members would approach Sarah with concerned faces and offer their sympathy. Some suggested she should be moved to a safer location. Others recommended that she request immediate medical intervention to avoid the pregnancy altogether. The worst part was that everyone seemed to think they were being helpful. Sarah tried to explain that she was excited about having babies, but this only made the other crew members more worried about her mental state. Dr. Kess, the ship's medical officer, actually ran extra scans to make sure Sarah wasn't experiencing some kind of stress-related breakdown. All human readings are normal, Dr. Kess reported to Zara 9 after the tests. But I am concerned about her attitude toward the situation. What do you mean? Zara 9 asked. She seems happy about it. Zara 9's ears went up. Is that bad? It is unusual. Most species react to impending Luparian, youngling arrival with appropriate fear and preparation rituals. Dr. Chen seems to think this will be a positive experience. Even Zara 9 wasn't sure what to make of her mate's optimism. Every Luparian knew that youngling time was dangerous and difficult. The fact that Sarah seemed excited instead of terrified was confusing. But Sarah was not just being optimistic. She was working harder than she had ever worked before. She started by redesigning their living quarters. Human families had always adapted their homes for children, and Sarah saw no reason why this should be different. She just had to think bigger. First, she reinforced everything: the walls, the furniture, the floor panels. She used the same materials that were used to build starship hulls. If the younglings wanted to test their claws and teeth on something, they would find surfaces that could handle it. Then she started thinking about enrichment. Sarah had read that Luparian younglings needed mental stimulation to keep them from becoming destructive. On their homeworld, they would explore forests and hunt small prey. On a starship, they would need other ways to use their energy. Sarah built puzzle feeders, devices that would make the younglings work to get their food. She designed climbing structures that could be reconfigured into different shapes. She created hiding spots and hunting games that would challenge their developing minds. The other crew members watched, her work with amazement and growing respect. Dr. Chen, said Chief Engineer Rodriguez during one of Sarah's construction sessions.
What exactly are you building?
Sarah looked up from where she was welding a joint on what looked like a very complicated jungle gym. It's an enrichment structure. The babies will need things to climb on and explore. Rodriguez walked around the structure, examining Sarah's work. This is built to starship safety standards. It needs to be strong enough to handle younglings who can bite through metal. And these moving parts? The structure can be changed into different configurations. If the babies get bored with one setup, I can rearrange it into something new. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Dr. Chen, most species just build a cage and hope for the best. A cage won't work. Luparian younglings are too smart and too curious. If you try to contain them, they'll just figure out how to escape, and then they'll be even more destructive because they're frustrated. So instead of containing them, I'm giving them appropriate outlets for their energy and intelligence. Sarah went back to her welding. They want to hunt? I'll give them puzzle feeders that let them hunt for their food. They want to climb? I'll give them structures designed for climbing. They want to explore? I'll give them new things to discover. Rodriguez watched Sarah work for a few more minutes. This might actually work. Word about Sarah's preparations spread through the ship. Crew members started stopping by to see what she was building. What they found surprised them. Instead of the desperate defensive measures they expected, Sarah's quarters were starting to look like the most advanced child development center in the galaxy. Every surface was designed with purpose. Every object served multiple functions. Every space could be used for learning and play. It's like she's building a school instead of a prison. Dr. Seth observed a Click whistle. Human approach is very different from other species, Click whistle agreed. Other species try to control younglings. Human tries to engage with younglings. The most impressive part of Sarah's preparations was her study of Luparian behavior and psychology. She didn't just read about what Luparian younglings did. She tried to understand why they did it. Luparian younglings chewed on things not just because they were teething, but because they were learning about different materials and textures. Sarah provided appropriate chew toys made from safe materials with different hardness levels. Luparian younglings climbed on everything, not just because they could, but because climbing was how they learned about spatial relationships and developed their coordination. Sarah built structures specifically designed for safe climbing. Luparian younglings hunted small moving objects not just because of instinct, but because the hunting behavior was how they learned problem-solving and teamwork skills. Sarah created mechanical toys that moved in unpredictable patterns and required cooperation to catch. She's not trying to stop them from being Luparian. Zara 9 explained to her friend Commander Thex during one of their off-duty conversations. She's trying to help them be the best Luparians they can be. That's a very human way of thinking about it, Thex replied. Most species just try to survive youngling season. Sarah doesn't want to just survive it. She wants to enjoy it. The most remarkable thing about Sarah's preparations was how she involved the rest of the crew. Instead of treating the upcoming younglings like a problem that she had to handle alone, she turned it into a ship-wide project. She asked Dr. Seth to help design educational activities that would teach the younglings about different species and cultures. She worked with Click Whistle to create mechanical toys that would satisfy the younglings' curiosity about how things worked. She even convinced Lieutenant Vex to help her design sensory experiences that would be enriching, but not overwhelming. Dr. Chen has turned a potential disaster into a community project. Captain Rodriguez noted in her log, the crew is more united and engaged than they have been in months. Everyone wants to contribute something to help with the younglings. As Sarah's preparations became more elaborate, the attitude of the crew began to change. They stopped offering sympathy and started offering help. They stopped seeing the younglings as a threat and started seeing them as new crew members who would need support and guidance. Maybe having Luparian younglings on the ship won't be so bad, Dr. Kess admitted to Zara 9 during a medical checkup. Dr. Chen seems to have everything under control. Zara 9's ears went up with surprise. No one had ever said that about Luparian younglings before. You really think so? Look at what she's built. Look at how much she's learned. Look at how she's gotten the whole crew involved in helping. Dr. Kess made some notes in Zara 9's medical file. Most species just try to contain younglings and wait for them to grow up. Dr. Chen is planning to raise them. What's the difference? Containing something means you're just trying to prevent damage until the problem goes away. Raising something means you're helping it grow into what it's supposed to become. Dr. Kess looked up from the medical scanner. I think your mate might be the first person in the galaxy who's actually excited about helping Luparian younglings reach their full potential. Zara 9 thought about this as she walked back to their quarters. She found Sarah working on her latest project, a series of interactive wall panels that would respond to touch and movement in different ways. How are you feeling about all this? Sarah asked without looking up from her work. About what? About me turning our home into a youngling playground. About me getting the whole crew involved. About me acting like this is going to be fun instead of terrifying. Zara 9 sat down and watched her mate work. Sarah's hands were steady and sure as she connected circuits and programmed responses. Her scent was calm and focused, not worried or afraid. I'm starting to think you might be right, Zara 9 said quietly. Sarah looked up, surprised. Really? Every Luparian knows that youngling season is something you survive, not something you enjoy. But watching you prepare for this, maybe we've been thinking about it wrong. Sarah smiled and reached out to touch Zara 9's paw. Maybe we're going to find out together. The younglings arrived 3 weeks earlier than Dr. Kess had predicted, which everyone later agreed was very typical behavior for Luparian babies. Sarah was in the middle of calibrating the final puzzle, feeder, when Zara 9 suddenly stopped what she was doing and stood very still. "Sarah," Zara 9 said in a quiet voice, "almost done with this setting. Just give me one more minute." "Sarah." Zara 9's voice was different now, more serious. Sarah looked up and saw that Zara 9's ears were standing straight up and her tail was rigid. "What is it?" "It's time." "Time for what?" Then Sarah saw the expression on Zara 9's face and understood. Oh, time. "Right now time?" Zara 9 nodded, then made a soft whining sound that Sarah had never heard before. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Dr. Kess and her medical team took over the specially prepared medical bay. Captain Rodriguez put the ship on quiet running, no unnecessary noise or activity. The crew waited in the common areas, talking in whispers. Sarah paced outside the medical bay like an expectant father from an old Earth movie. Every time she heard a sound from inside, her heart jumped. Zara 9 had explained that Luparian births were usually quick, but this felt like the longest day of Sarah's life. Finally, Dr. Kess emerged from the medical bay. Her usually calm face showed exhaustion and amazement. "Dr. Chen, you may come in now," she said. "Both mother and younglings are healthy." "Both? How many?" "2, twins." Sarah rushed into the medical bay and found Zara 9 lying on the medical platform, looking tired but alert. Curled up against her side were 2 small shapes that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The younglings were bigger than Sarah had expected, about the size of human 6-month-old babies, but clearly much more developed. Their eyes were already open and alert. Their small ears were perfectly pointed like Zara 9's. They had tiny claws and small sharp teeth that were visible when they yawned. But what surprised Sarah most was how beautiful they were. Their fur was soft and fluffy, darker than Zara 9's but with the same golden highlights. They made small sounds that were part whimper, part growl, and completely adorable. "They're perfect," Sarah whispered, reaching out to gently touch one tiny head. The youngling she touched immediately turned toward her finger and tried to grab it with surprisingly strong small paws. Its grip was firm and its claws, while small, were already sharp. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Kess said quietly, "I should warn you. They are already showing typical Luparian youngling behaviors." As if to demonstrate, the second youngling opened its mouth and bit the edge of the medical platform. Its small teeth left tiny marks in the metal. "How long before they start moving around?" Sarah asked. "They are already moving around," Dr. Kess replied. "I had to install additional restraint fields to keep them on the platform." Sarah looked more carefully and saw that the younglings were indeed wiggling and pushing against something invisible that kept them in place. "They've been trying to explore since they opened their eyes 20 minutes after birth," Zara 9 said with a tired but proud voice. "Dr. Kess says they're unusually active even for Luparian younglings. Can we take them home now?" Dr. Kess hesitated. "Dr. Chen, are you certain you're prepared? Once I remove the restraint fields, they will be very difficult to control." Sarah looked at her 2 babies, who were now both trying to chew on the invisible barrier around them. "I'm as ready as I'll ever be." The trip from the medical bay to their quarters was an adventure. Sarah carried one youngling while Zara 9 carried the other. Both babies spent the entire walk looking around with bright, curious eyes and trying to grab everything they could reach. The youngling in Sarah's arms managed to get hold of her hair and seemed fascinated by the texture. Its grip was so strong that Sarah had to carefully work its tiny claws free. The other youngling tried to bite Zara 9's collar and made frustrated sounds when it couldn't get through the fabric. "They're explorers," Sarah said with delight. "They're trouble," Zara 9 replied, but her tone was fond. When they reached their quarters, Sarah set down her youngling in the center of the main room and stepped back to watch. Zara 9 did the same with the other baby. For a moment, both younglings sat still, looking around at their new environment. Then, as if they had received a signal that only they could hear, they both started moving. What happened next was like watching a nature documentary about baby predators. The younglings moved with speed and purpose that seemed impossible for creatures so young. They split up immediately, each taking a different direction, and began systematically exploring everything in the room. The first youngling went straight for the climbing structure Sarah had built. Within minutes, it had figured out how to use its claws to grip the surfaces and was halfway to the top. The second youngling found the puzzle feeder and began trying to solve it with focused determination. "They're so smart," Sarah breathed. Watching in amazement, the youngling on the climbing structure reached the top and immediately started looking for a way to go higher. When it couldn't find one, it made a sound that was clearly frustrated and started examining the ceiling to see if it could climb there too. The youngling with the puzzle feeder had figured out that pushing certain panels would make treats fall out. It was now systematically testing every panel to see which ones worked. "Sarah," Zara 9 said nervously, "should they be able to do that already?" Before Sarah could answer, the youngling on the climbing structure made a discovery. It found that one of the panels Sarah had built could be moved. With determination that impressed and terrified Sarah, the young creature began working to slide the panel out of place. "Oh no," Sarah said. Realizing what was about to happen, the panel came loose, and the youngling immediately tried to fit through the opening it had created. When it found that the opening was too small, it began working to make it bigger. "They're problem solvers," Sarah said with a mixture of pride and worry. The second youngling had completely figured out the puzzle feeder and was now looking for new challenges. It spotted its sibling working on the panel and immediately came over to help. Together, they managed to create an opening large enough for one of them to fit through. The first youngling squeezed through the opening and immediately began exploring the space behind the wall panel. Sarah could hear small scratching sounds as it moved around in the narrow space. "Sarah, we need to get it out of there," Zara 9 said. But when Sarah tried to reach through the opening, the youngling treated it like a game. It would come close enough for Sarah to almost touch it, then dart away with what sounded like laughter. The second youngling, seeing how much fun its sibling was having, began working to make the opening bigger so it could join the game. "They're working together," Sarah realized. "They're cooperating to solve problems. They're escaping on their first day," Zara 9 pointed out. It took Sarah and Zara 9 20 minutes to convince the first youngling to come out from behind the wall panel. They finally succeeded by offering food, but only after the clever baby had thoroughly explored every inch of space it could reach. Once both younglings were back in the main room, Sarah quickly sealed the opening they had created, but she couldn't help feeling impressed by what she had witnessed. "They're not even a day old and they've already figured out how to escape. Work together and solve puzzles," she said to Zara 9. "Is that good or bad?" Sarah watched as the younglings found new things to explore. They moved with confidence and curiosity, testing everything they encountered. When they found Sarah's specially designed chew toys, they examined them carefully before deciding which textures they preferred. When they discovered the interactive wall panels, they quickly learned that different touches produced different responses. Within minutes, they were creating complex patterns of lights and sounds. "It's amazing," Sarah said softly. "Look how fast they learn. Look how much they want to understand everything around them." The younglings spent their first evening at home systematically exploring every part of their environment. They tested the strength of every surface, examined every object, and figured out how every mechanism worked. By bedtime, they had successfully solved every puzzle Sarah had created, climbed every structure she had built, and found 3 potential escape routes that Sarah hadn't thought of. They had also begun showing affection toward both their parents. They made soft, happy sounds when Sarah or Zara 9 came near. They seemed to enjoy being petted and held. When they were tired, they curled up together in a pile of soft blankets and made contented purring sounds. "They're not just dangerous," Sarah realized as she watched the younglings sleep. "They're incredibly intelligent, social, and affectionate. They want to learn and explore and connect with us." Zara 9 curled up next to Sarah, both of them keeping watch over their sleeping babies. "I've never seen Luparian younglings act like this before." "How do you mean?" "They're happy, content. Most Luparian younglings are more frustrated and aggressive. These two seem to be enjoying themselves," Sarah smiled. "Maybe that's because we're not trying to contain them. We're trying to engage with them." As if to prove her point, one of the sleeping younglings made a soft sound and reached out with a tiny paw to touch its sibling. Even in sleep, they wanted to stay connected. "Tomorrow is going to be interesting," Zara-9 said quietly. 3 months later, the younglings had grown into something that no one on the ship had ever seen before. They were now the size of human 8-year-olds, with the strength and speed that Dr. Seth had warned Sarah about. Their claws were sharp enough to leave marks in metal, and their teeth could bite through most materials on the ship. They moved with the fluid grace of natural predators and could climb surfaces that seemed impossible to scale. But instead of the chaos and destruction that everyone had expected, the ship had become a more interesting and lively place. Sarah had named the younglings Max and Luna, simple names that were easy for all species to pronounce. Max was slightly larger and more adventurous, always the first to explore new places. Luna was more thoughtful and strategic, often figuring out solutions that Max would then help implement. Both younglings had developed personalities that amazed the crew. They were curious about everything, friendly with everyone, and incredibly eager to learn. "Dr. Chen," said Lieutenant Vex during the morning shift change, "your younglings solved the puzzle I was working on yesterday." Sarah looked up from her breakfast. "What puzzle?" "The quantum mathematics problem that has been bothering me for weeks. I left it on my datapad in the common room. When I came back, they had arranged my stylus and eating utensils into a pattern that showed the solution." "They can't read quantum mathematics," Sarah said, confused. "No, but they can recognize patterns. They saw the mathematical relationships as a kind of puzzle, and solved it the same way they solved their feeding puzzles." This was becoming a common occurrence. The younglings would find crew members working on problems and would offer their own solutions. Sometimes their solutions were wrong, but often they were surprisingly insightful. "They think differently than adult minds," Dr. Seth had explained. "They see patterns that we miss because we are thinking too hard about rules and procedures." The younglings had also become popular with the entire crew. Instead of hiding from them or asking for transfers, crew members now actively sought them out. Click Whistle had started bringing mechanical puzzles for them to solve. "Their approach to problem solving is very educational," the engineer explained. "They try things that adult minds would reject as impossible." Dr. Kess had begun including them in her medical research. "They have excellent observational skills," she reported. "They notice details about patient behavior that I would miss." Even Captain Rodriguez had found ways to work with the younglings. "They're excellent at detecting inconsistencies in data," she noted in her log. "Their minds aren't limited by expectations, so they notice when something doesn't fit the pattern." The most remarkable change was in how the younglings interacted with other species. Unlike traditional Luparian children, who were often aggressive toward non-Luparians, Max and Luna seemed to enjoy meeting different kinds of people. They had learned to modify their behavior based on who they were with. With Dr. Seth, they moved more slowly and kept their voices quiet, because they had figured out that sudden movements and loud noises made the reptilian nervous. With Click Whistle, they were more energetic and playful, because the insectoid enjoyed active games. They're reading social cues, Sarah realized during one of her conversations with Zara-9. They're adapting their behavior to make other people comfortable. "That's not normal Luparian youngling behavior," Zara-9 replied. "Usually, younglings just act like younglings and expect everyone else to deal with it. Maybe it's because they're half human, or maybe it's because we've been teaching them to think about how their actions affect others. Whatever the reason, the result was unprecedented. For the first time in recorded history, other species were actively enjoying the company of Luparian younglings." The breakthrough moment came during the 4th month, when the ship encountered a serious problem. A solar storm had damaged some of the ship's external sensors, leaving blind spots in their navigation system. The crew was working to repair the damage, but they couldn't locate exactly where the problem was without risking a dangerous spacewalk. Max and Luna had been watching the crew work on the problem for several hours. They seemed fascinated by the technical discussions and the various attempts to solve the issue. Finally, Luna approached Sarah with a determined expression. "Mama Sarah," Luna said in the carefully pronounced words that all the younglings had learned, "we can find the broken place." "What do you mean, sweetie?" "The ship feels different where it's broken. We can feel it when we climb on the walls." Sarah stared at her daughter. "You can feel the difference?" Max joined his sister. "The vibrations are wrong in the broken places." "We can show you." Sarah called Captain Rodriguez immediately. "Captain, I think Max and Luna might be able to help locate the damaged sensors." "Dr. Chen, I appreciate their enthusiasm, but this is a complex technical problem. They say they can feel differences in the ship's vibrations where the damage is located. There was a pause. They can feel that? Their senses are much more sensitive than ours, and they've been climbing all over this ship for months. They know how it's supposed to feel. Captain Rodriguez agreed to let the younglings try. With careful supervision, Max and Luna led a team of engineers through the ship's corridors and maintenance spaces. They moved confidently through areas that were difficult for adult crew members to access, stopping at specific locations and pointing out spots where the feeling is wrong. Every location they identified turned out to be a place where the solar storm had caused damage. Remarkable, Chief Engineer Rodriguez said after they had mapped out all the problem areas. They found damage that our instruments missed. They're using their natural senses like biological diagnostic equipment. The repairs were completed in half the time it would have taken without the younglings' help. That evening, Captain Rodriguez made a ship-wide announcement. Thanks to the excellent work of Max and Luna, we have successfully repaired all storm damage and are back on course. I want to officially thank our youngest crew members for their valuable contribution to ship operations. The common room erupted in applause, and both younglings beamed with pride. Mama Sarah, Max said that night as Sarah was tucking them into their sleeping area, "Are we good at helping?" "You're very good at helping," Sarah confirmed. "We like helping," Luna added. "It makes everyone happy." Sarah kissed both younglings on the top of their fuzzy heads. "You make everyone happy just by being yourselves." As the weeks passed, word of Sarah's success with the younglings began to spread beyond their ship. Other vessels requested information about her methods. Research stations asked for copies of her reports. Dr. Seth started documenting everything Sarah did with the younglings. "This is revolutionary," she explained. "No one has ever successfully integrated Luparian younglings into a multi-species community before." "What do you think made the difference?" Sarah asked. "You treated them as individuals instead of as problems to be solved. You gave them challenges instead of restrictions. Most importantly, you included them in the community instead of isolating them." The most significant moment came when the ship received a communication from the Luparian Republic. A government official wanted to speak with Sarah about her innovative approaches to youngling development. "Dr. Chen," said the official through the communication system, "we have been monitoring reports about your situation with great interest. We understand that you have successfully raised hybrid younglings without major incidents." "That's correct. We would like to invite you to present your methods to our Child Development Council. Many Luparian families struggle with youngling season and your techniques might be beneficial." Sarah looked at Zara 9, who was listening to the conversation with amazement. "They want me to teach other Luparians how to raise their children?" "It appears that your human approach to child rearing has solved problems that have challenged our species for generations," the official replied. After the communication ended, Sarah sat quietly for a moment. "Zara, I think we've accidentally figured out something important." "What do you mean?" "Everyone always assumed that Luparian younglings were just naturally difficult and dangerous. But what if they were just bored and frustrated? What if they were acting out because no one was giving them appropriate challenges?" Zara 9 thought about this. "You mean they weren't being destructive because they were bad? They were being destructive because they were smart and energetic and had nothing appropriate to do with their intelligence and energy." "Exactly. Human children can be destructive too when they're bored or frustrated. But we've learned how to give them activities that channel their energy in positive ways." That night, as Sarah watched Max and Luna playing a complex game they had invented with click whistle, she realized something remarkable had happened. She had set out to simply survive having Luparian younglings. Instead, she had discovered a new way of thinking about child development that worked not just for her hybrid children, but potentially for Luparian younglings everywhere. More importantly, she had raised 2 children who were growing up to be intelligent, social, helpful members of a diverse community. They were learning to use their natural abilities to contribute positively to the lives of everyone around them. "Mama Sarah," Luna called from across the room. "Can you help us teach Click Whistle the hunting game?"